Thanks for joining us on Coast to Coast Pest Talk.
Okay. Well, hey guys, thanks for tuning in to the Coast to Coast Pest Talk podcast slash videocast. I'm Gabe Seymour with Pest Patrol. This is
Andy Sinefsky from Perimatech Pest Management out on the East Coast.
On the East Coast. And today we're going to be discussing the fear. No, not the fear. We're going to be discussing the business of fear. The business of fear. So
is that like selling fear? Is that like what the news does every night?
That's right. And that's actually the business that Andy and I will be starting as a news company. No.
Yeah. I think the media has that covered for us.
Yeah, they kind of got the corner market on fear. But We're going to be discussing how do you identify fear? How do you deal with fear? Kind of categorizing it, if it's legitimate or not, and then how to deal with fear in yourself, in your team, etc. So, Andy, take us away here. The fear of business.
Yeah,
the business of fear. Man, golly, I'm dyslexic. The business of fear.
That's all right. Worked either way. Yeah, this was inspired by some stuff that you had where you were talking about dealing with fear in growing your company. And it was something that really struck me when I heard you talking about that. And I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, that's something we don't put enough concerted thought into. I think just as a whole, we know it's there, like we pay lip service to it, but do we really sit down and go, what in the world is this? And why is it running my life? So really the first thing I sat down and thought about was what in the world constitutes fear. And I went way down a road that was a dead end road. Because I thought how fear worked in my business was the things that would make me anxious and cause me to do stuff. So the things where I would worry about, do I have enough money to pay payroll? Do I have, my safety programs, are they in line for my staff? The things that I would spend time on, the things that I would work on. And I go, okay, that's fear that's driving me. But it's really not. It's really productive paranoia that kind of motivates you into doing those things that you know you need to do. And I think to me, fear is not always a negative emotion per se, but I think that where you find fear is in the things that cause you to have inaction. So things that stop you from doing things, that's the fear that's deep down in your gut. So at its core, to me, I started to see fear as an excessive attachment to a specific future desired state. And what I mean by that is you want something to happen or something not to happen. And you being completely attached to having that future state be actualized is what causes fear. It can be, I really, really want to succeed and I might not, and you're scared, or I really, really don't want to fail, or I really, really don't want this bad thing to happen. And in either case, it is what I would define as sort of an overwhelming feeling where you don't even want to deal with it. You block it out. It's not functioning productively in your psyche. It's not motivating you towards some kind of productive action. And that's where I really kind of define the difference between like true fear and just anxiety or productive paranoia, like we were saying.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So can you walk through just a couple, we don't have to get super far into it, but can you walk through a couple specific examples of what would constitute fear?
Like for myself?
Yeah.
Like specific examples? Yeah.
Or maybe just more broadly, because I know later you're going to go into some more specifics for maybe yourself, but take an average listener they're in pest control or they're running a business, what are some of the things they're going to
Yeah.
have fear?
What are some of the things that caused you to have not to turn it back on you,
Oh,
but like
no, dang it.
that was the Uno reverse card right there.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
no,
Oh,
because
gosh.
what were some of the things? Because I think it was a matter of growth for you, right? Was that something
Yeah.
that
Yeah. And for me, it was really feeling that the cash flow constraint when I had basically hired two new employees in the last 3 months and feeling that expansion pressure. Like the productivity of the one was maybe just getting there, and then I stacked another employee on top. Uh, and just feeling that weight, having to buy a new truck, outfit it, spend a bunch of my time and mental energy and all that. So that's a lot of the stuff for me was sort of that financial side.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a huge one for any small business owner, right? Like as you're growing that business, unless you're willing to finance the growth, you've got to fund the growth.
Yep.
And it's always those, especially when you're in those little hinge points from certain sizes going up to the next up the ladder, the next rung up the ladder. There's always those that year or two hinge years where you go, oh my gosh, we really have to eat this, and your profitability suffers because you're funding that growth and investing into people and material and equipment, and that can definitely cause a lot of fear. This is a point for me where I have recognized in myself that our growth was, and I knew this for a long time, that we artificially constricted our growth. We
Yeah.
would make sure that we were never going to outstrip our capacity. And I didn't really recognize it for a long time as being fear, because it's not acceptable for a person, especially somebody that owns a business or is in a leadership position, to say, yes, I'm making decisions out of fear. I made my decisions based on I was terrified, right? We can never say that to anyone.
Right.
I guess you and I can. This is just between us, so we don't have to worry.
We can cut that out. Good.
No one will ever hear that. But honestly, if you go through and look at our history of our P&L and you look at our marketing budget is almost zero, like literally $0. I think as a percentage of our annual revenue, we might spend 0.1% on marketing. And most of that is like paper and, like
Right.
business cards. There's like $1,000 worth of like business cards and things like that in our marketing budget. So those decisions, those inaction decisions that I was making as we went along were because I was in the back of my mind terrified of financing growth. I've always been just irrationally scared of financing things. And I was irrationally scared of stretching our capacity. I like to be very, very comfortable with how many people we have to service the clients. I never want to get to a point where we're like, oh my gosh, everyone's working overtime and 6 days, 7 days a week or anything like that. So that caused complete inaction in that arena. And over the years, when you look at it, you can see where we've benefited in some regards. I felt better about our position. We didn't finance anything and we didn't outstrip our capacity, but we're negatively impacted because we're probably, a certain factor smaller than we would be otherwise. With somebody that didn't have those hangups, I think you'd see a better growth trajectory. And that's just me being scared of it. Quite
Yeah.
honestly.
Are there other, you talk about inaction. Are there other sort of opportunity costs to inaction? There's obviously like the growth. Maybe we could be at 15 or 30 techs now instead of uh, 10 team members or whatever it is, are there other opportunity costs to that type of inaction, aside from the growth side?
Yeah, I think that there's places where there's an inaction, and I don't think I'm unique to this. I think a lot of people suffer from this. Would be, are you making staffing decisions? Do you have inaction on staffing decisions because you're scared to do what needs to be done in some cases? Are you not having hard conversations with people to correct them? Are you not letting people go that you need to let go? And are you holding on to things too long because you're scared of what might happen? And actually, I don't know why this didn't occur to me right off the top. Price increases. I think that small businesses don't do price increases because they're terrified. They're really, really scared of what could happen. And they're attached to the desired future state of having all the same clients because these are familiar and comfortable. But the future state of, we may lose 10% of our customer base because we had to raise prices, but we kept the customer base that really appreciates us and the stuff that's profitable. And usually it's the stuff that is less profitable and more of a pain in the butt that ends up going away. But I think that's the area where, like, especially in our industry, we chronically do not raise prices. Like, companies just, it should be every year, right? It should be sort of standard, but it is, I'm not surprised when I talk to people in our industry and they say, "Oh, I haven't raised prices in 8 years." They're like, "Oh my God. Oh my goodness," because it's terrifying. So that inaction can really cost you.
Yeah, certainly.
So the next question that occurs to me when I think about all these things is, okay, what do you do about this? How do you overcome this fear? And fear is ubiquitous with man. Like, we're all imbued with the capacity to fear, and it's important. It's part of our existence. But how do you manage that fear is really critical. Too many times we tend to push it down and ignore it, and our brain is excessively good at helping us do that, helping us have fear. The things we're scared of and afraid of disappear to us. We're going to push them completely away. I mean, that's what denial is, for sure. So for me, what I've found over the years has really been effective is to first literally write down about the things that because I may not know initially what the fear actually is. So I'm trying to root it out. So I'll start writing about the things where I have inaction and I'm underperforming, and I'll start talking to myself in writing about, almost like a journal, about why that is and what's going on there. And in this process of actually physically writing it out, I'm manifesting something that is in my mind in the future in concrete now. So I'm defining the attributes of what is scaring me. Through this process, what it does is it allows me to take something that I can't really apply like your rational brain on, because it exists in your imagination in the future as an emotion, and then make it real, define its attributes, and then apply a rational, sort of scientific, observational look at what is actually scaring me. And that's really been the most effective way for me to do this. It allows me then to go, okay, what's the best case scenario outcome if my worst fears don't happen? I get the best case and things go great. What's the worst case outcome if things go terrible? My worst fears are realized. How bad is that? What's the most likely case of what's going to happen? And in this, you can think through what you might be facing, and then you end up making much better decisions. And for me, it clears a path forward for action then at that point. And one of the strangest things ever when I started to do this was, one of the things I was really worried about was our guys drive a lot. And so I was scared about everybody's safety. And I'm thinking, the two most dangerous things in pest control are your ladder and your truck to me. Everybody thinks it's, oh, those pesticides are going to get you. I'm like, no, you're much more likely fall off a roof or a ladder,
Right.
or crash your truck.
Yep.
So I was really nervous about this, and I actually went through and wrote an entire narrative of what would happen if one of our people got in a car accident and we had a traffic fatality on the job, and what would be all the steps of things that happened throughout that day, who would talk to who, how everyone would potentially react, who has to go to the hospital and contact family, and what happens the next day. Do you close? Do you not? How does the staff deal with that? Do we all come together? Do we spread apart and everybody go home? So all these questions were things that I wanted to flesh out and make real. And I ended up with like sort of a timeline story of every single event as I could see it happening. And it really provided some clarity on, okay, what are my thoughts on these things? And it wasn't a pretend thing that was, oh my God, if somebody died in a car accident on the job, I just can't even think about that, and I'm not going to do anything about it. It made me go, oh, okay, this could be a real thing. Do we have life insurance for all of our people? Which we do now. Do we have emergency contacts for everybody? We do now. We didn't before this. These were all things that came up in the course of me writing these things down, and having some kind of plan for your worst fears gives you peace of mind to wrestle with them. You have no match wrestling those fears when they're imaginary. They're like a superhero that has every single superpower and you can't beat them. But if you confine them into reality and define their attributes, now you stand a chance of wrestling that beast down. And that was the most evident example of that for me.
And so I initially, when I read through your notes, I was going to ask sort of how do you identify which fears to tackle? You mentioned basically that you write it down, and walk me through like your initial just first. You said you're sort of journaling it out. Just walk through that one more time.
Yeah. So for me, I try to root fears out, because they're kind of transparent. Sometimes other people can see them better than you can, because a fear is going to live in your blind spot. It's the monster that's under your bed that's hiding somewhere, and you can't quite see it. It's like in your dream, you can't quite make out the thing that's chasing you ever. You can't quite focus on it. It's gray and cloudy. So I go off of usually the shadow of the fear, which is the effect. Where am I struggling with inaction? Where am I struggling with things where I'm underperforming? What are the jobs or tasks during a day that I'm avoiding or dreading or I don't want to do? Or even the ones that I keep putting off. Like, I know I should be, whatever the case, I know I should be cold calling 10 more people a day than I am. Why am I not? What am I scared of? Why is this happening? And in that process, you'll start to sort of find where they are, and you'll have these little eureka moments of, that's what it is. Oh my gosh, it was this thing that was really behind it, because it's almost never the actual thing. It's always some other thing that's causing the observable phenomenon.
Yeah. And so what do you do? Take take the car accident. Okay. Beautiful mug.
Thank you. Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so take the car accident. It's definitely reasonable for you to have that as a fear, right? That's reasonable. You break it down like you've done. You have, this is what we're going to do. We make sure they all have life insurance, make sure all your, T's are crossed and I's are dotted as far as you're able as the business owner. Then say it happens, there still is going to be an aspect of probably fear and anxiety just in the moment that's kind of unavoidable, right?
Sure.
So is that just kind of unavoidable? It's nothing we can do. Sometimes there's just going to be a level of things that you have to push through. How do you prepare for when you do all the not psychoanalyzing, you do all the sort of hashing out details. This is what it is. This is what it isn't. And then the thing is still really hard.
I don't think
What do you do then?
yeah, I don't think there's a way to make it not difficult when
Yeah.
the worst fear happens. Um, I think that those reactions, I don't know if I'd even really qualify them to be negative reactions from fear. They're the biological reactions to responding to something that's happening. Your adrenaline and all the things that kick in, heightened perception, and all the everything is in full alert at that point, and you respond. And I think when those bad events or those things that you don't want to have happen, you can respond in the moment with that. Where I feel like you get damaged by fear is in the 10 years prior that you suffered not doing certain things or behaving as if the bad thing already had happened over and over and over again when it hasn't. You're traumatizing yourself in that process. So when it actually happens, though, and that's the other thing, it's a very small, these are usually small percentage as far as likelihood of occurring. If it actually happens, you can respond. There'll be fear, there'll be sadness, there'll be all the emotional things. But at that point, that's when it's appropriate to have those sort of reactions. It's not appropriate when, like, every single day you're going to get up and not leave the house because you're scared somebody's going to have a car accident. That you can't do that. You got to do that.
So would you have so take, like you mentioned, potentially having to fire somebody. You got an underperforming team member, they've been warned a bunch and they're just not the right fit for your company for whatever reason. You're anxious about having that conversation. You don't want to ruffle feathers or disappoint someone or whatever. You do what you're saying. You kind of break down, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm afraid of. And then you still have to go have a really hard conversation at the end of that. Right? So it's like you can do all the prep is helpful in making sure you're not just unnecessarily dwelling on it or in showing you the things you need to do. But sometimes the action is still going to be really hard.
It's still going to be bad. I'll tell you though, in every time when you sort of war game this beforehand, the worst case scenario almost never occurs.
Yes.
Like it's almost a 0% chance. So if you're saying, okay, we got to let somebody go, this is going to be terrible, this is going to be very hard. The worst case scenario is the person, they stand up, they throw a chair at you, they swear at you, they leave, they say, you're the worst SOB ever. They slash your tires on the way out.
Right.
That. I don't know of anybody that's had that actually happen. I'm sure it has. Never happened to me, but that worst case scenario never happens. And if you're prepared for even the worst case scenario, when it pulls back into a moderate or most likely case scenario is the one that most often occurs, where the person is, oh, well, I'm really, upset or, let down or whatever. And you sign the paperwork, you do the things, and there you are. So you're really prepared. I think it might come down a little bit to, do you feel like you're better prepared to deal with something if you know what's coming, or if you don't? Like if you're going to go and have, I don't know, a surgery, they're going to fix your knee or something, your ACL. Do you want to know how that process is done? So you have expectations. Okay, this is about what's going to happen. This is how it's going to go. It's still going to suck. They're still slicing your knee open, but then you kind of know what to expect from it. I think that fear and anxiety, you stop victimizing yourself with it. because now you know what's
Yeah.
coming. I don't know. Some people may want to be just completely ignorant of what's coming and just dump themselves into it, but that's not me at all.
Yeah. Better the devil that you know than the devil you don't know, right?
Sure.
Is there ever a time we've kind of talked about personal fear and how are we managing it for ourselves, maybe for our own fears of the business? You had some great thoughts on what causes fear in your staff and how do you sort of navigate that? So would you kind of jump into what's that look like? How do you identify that in your staff and what do you do about it?
Yeah, sure. This is an area that's really interesting to me because it's something that I don't think gets addressed a lot. I haven't heard a lot of talk about this. Like, should you be concerned with what your staff is scared of? Like, what generates fear in the staff, and what the heck can you do about it? And this is an area that's a little more experimental, I guess, for me, that we're working on. But the first thing I say, I think yes. I think 100% yes, you should be concerned about what your staff is afraid of. I think as an owner or even a manager of people, what they're scared of is probably one of the most predictive elements of their performance. Because the same things that cause you as, say, a leader or a manager to have inaction or bad behavior or avoidance are going to do the exact same thing in your staff. Unless you have people that are like absolute bad actors, because you'll get people that are not going to be, they're not a team player, they're not going to join and want to go in the direction that everyone's going. Aside from that, I think this is one of the things that causes people to have the most performance problems, is that they have unidentified fears that they're carrying and are affecting their day-to-day performance of their job. So to me, the question really becomes, what drives fear in the staff? And there's one sort of overarching root cause as far as what I've determined, and that is their insecurity or uncertainty in their status in the hierarchy. And this doesn't mean that people need to be being promoted all the time. It's that they don't know where they fit necessarily.
Yeah.
We're very sensitive as a species, as a social species, to where are we in the hierarchy of our little tribe, clan, whatever. We're extremely attuned to looking for tiny little social cues that will tell us you're okay, you're in the group, you're not going to get kicked out and eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. For our brains, it is primitive survival to understand where we are. So it's hard to downplay the amount of anxiety and fear that's caused by insecurity in that status. And what do we do in business but have a hierarchy that is often invisible and not clearly stated? And so everyone is trying to figure out where their place is in there. Of course, they're going to have problems with that. You can have little things that a boss or manager says make somebody doubt their position in that hierarchy. They have a coworker that seems to do something better and get a little perk or get a raise that they thought they should get. These things seem like petty and nitpicky, but they're really not, because the people that are subjected to this sort of situation are just trying to figure out where they are. And that actually brings up one of the most missed opportunities, I think, that exist in business, and that is using performance reviews to achieve managing your staff's fear. I think that is sort of a revolutionary idea on how to use a performance review. Everybody in business will absolutely say, yes, you have to do regular performance reviews. You have to keep, give them their KPIs, their key performance indicators. Here's your number, and you have to hit this number, and you didn't hit that number, so you're bad, or you got to bring this performance up, or or whatever. But you're missing an opportunity there to use that performance review to give them explicit evidence of where they stand, exactly where they are in the hierarchy. And it doesn't mean that you have to tell them they're the greatest. You can say that you have a lot of work to do. Giving someone certainty that they're on the bottom of the hierarchy is just as good or sometimes better than giving them a more nebulous idea of you're somewhere in the middle, high, upper middle, who knows where. If you say, yes, you're on the bottom of the totem pole, you're on the bottom rung of the ladder, you're right here. Here, this is exactly your position. This is where I see your spot. It gives them that security. I think that this is also in the performance review, aside from the feedback of what they've done in the past. I think there's a big opportunity that's missed in forward looking. This is the narrative that I see for you moving forward. So not only do you give somebody here's where you are right now, but here's where I see you going to, or here's the path that I see for you to get you to this next level that you want to get to. I think more than anything in work specific fears for staff, that is the missed opportunity. That's where we need to concentrate a lot of effort.
Absolutely. And so when you say performance reviews, are you talking about, is this an annual thing? Is this every 6 months? Is this every month? What's this look like?
Yeah.
In like maybe an optimal situation.
It's weird. I think that it is dependent on each staff member. So I don't think that there's a formulaic way to say, hey, you have to do performance reviews every quarter. You have to do a performance review once a year, every 6 months. Any of these where you just generate a formula are based on nothing really. They're just based on, it seems like it would be good if we did this quarterly. It seems like management could manage this if we did this every 6 months. But each staff member is going to have a unique requirement for this sort of reassurance. Some will need it a lot. They'll need constant feedback. Where am I? Where am I? Where am I? If their levels of anxiety, their history lead them to be more on the, I don't know, let's say needy side, as far as like needing attention, like needing to reconfirm. A lot of times I've noticed it's people that have had traumatic childhoods, had insecurity in their childhood, sometimes need a lot more attention to be like, no, you're okay. This is where you are. Sometimes people need almost no attention in there. Once a year, they're good. They got it. So I think each staff member, you kind of need to feel out and go, okay, this person needs a little more. This one needs a little less. And it's really okay. And I've started doing this a lot, is to just open up and be honest and say, hey, I'm having trouble reading you. And I'm not sure exactly how much attention you need. I want to make sure that you are getting enough from me that you feel secure in your position, and I'm giving you enough positive feedback, or I'm giving you enough constructive feedback to improve for you. And it's okay to say that. I've had staff members where I've literally told them, I have trouble reading you. When you do this, this, and this, I read it as whatever, you're mad. And then they go, no, I'm not at all. I didn't mean it like that. I was like, okay, that's cool. Just so you know, I can't read you in these situations just off social cues. So we have to be really annoyingly explicit, and it's not socially okay, but you have to be like really speak what you're thinking and not assume that they can understand you or you're understanding them. You need to continuously reconfirm. And through that, you'll get a feel for people. I have staff members that need hardly any status assurance. They need hardly any sit down, let's sit down and have a one-on-one. They crumble under it. They hate it. They're like, no, we don't need to do that. I'm good. We're totally cool. I know where we're at. I have others where you got to do it a lot. And you may also consider that for some staff members, that may be a limiting factor. If you have people that say need every single day attention, they may be so insecure in that position that they're not in the right position, maybe even they may not be at the right company. You
Right.
You may have to part ways and say, look, I can't sit there every single day with you and reconfirm your place here. So that's something to consider too.
And you might have a team member that comes to you, is completely insecure. You work with them and you do regular meetings and you help them grow in that. And maybe they need that less often. And then you have another one that has been with you for 10 years and then they go through a divorce. And all of a sudden, now they need weekly meetings, right? It's like,
Absolutely.
it's going to be a dynamic sort of situation. That's really encouraging for me. And I want to do a better job of implementing that. And I just, as you're talking about like the ones that need a lot and that need none, like I have employees on both the spectrums. I'm like, but I need to be doing better reviews for both of them, I think.
Sure.
More intentional and stuff all the way across the spectrum. So
sure. One of the things that I've found over the years is I've gotten better at not projecting my understanding of what would be enough contact or what would be adequate amounts onto the staff. If I project that, well, this is what I like, or this is what I would expect, or what I would thrive under, it is rarely the case that that is what every single one of my staff members actually are thinking they want or need. So removing your ego out of that projection is difficult, but it's super critical to really manage those people the best way. And you make a great point that it's absolutely dynamic. Someone may be able to shoulder more anxiety, uncertainty, and fear in their day-to-day job when their background life at home or whatever is in a better state. That changes. Their grandmother dies, or they get a divorce, like you said, or they have financial stress. And all of a sudden, their systems to cope with fear, anxiety, and the stresses of daily life now are taxed to a point where there's not a lot of reserve left for work to be managed and that fear to be managed at work. So you may have somebody that for a long time was fine and needed once a year, you check in, twice a year, you do performance reviews, whatever it is. All of a sudden now there's like, wow, they're really struggling. And we need to understand that we employ whole human beings that exist after they clock out. They have a life that still has stress and things and obligations after they check out.
Pest control is life, Andy. Pest control is life.
There's nothing else. There's nothing else. For some of us, that's the case, but not everybody made that choice. Oh my gosh.
I'm literally like, as you're talking, I'm like, I need to get my.
Oh no.
Can we add let's add something into that official one, because I have another question. What risk is there? You're a company, you've got a few employees. Maybe you're a company, you've got a number of employees, a dozen employees, 20 employees, and you have not put processes in place to help you manage your employees' fear and anxiety and worry and to help show them where they are in the structure. What's the risk there for a business owner?
So you're asking then if you ignore your staff's fears and anxieties and just plow ahead.
Yep.
I think ultimately the risk is that you'll have some major corrections at some point. I think that you're going to have major turnover that you're going to be dealing with, and you're not going to know why. You may have recruitment problems and you don't really know why. I think you're going to have productivity issues. I think that eventually those things are definitely going to catch up with you. And it may be dependent on if you're naturally inclined as a leader to sort of be nurturing and involved in a way that is attentive to those staff members. You probably can go a lot farther before you have some of those like negative outcomes. But I think at some point you have to reckon with that. And I've heard of a lot of companies that get to this hinge point that they need to then go back and correct. They need to take a couple steps back and correct staffing and correct problems. And they could be 20, 40, 100 employees. And then they go, okay, this is too much. This is the car is out of alignment and the wheels are wobbling and we got to take the wheels off and put new ones on and then address these things. I think if at the earliest stage you can start recognizing those things and building it into the system, the better off you'll be. And I think you'll have a smoother path without that big pit stop where you got to like, oh, we have to overhaul the engine today.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any advice for maybe I'm thinking of a middle management guy that's working for a big national brand, and maybe they have systems and processes in place for some of this stuff. Do you have any advice for a guy like that that maybe enjoys listening to pest control podcasts like this and who wants to love their team, but they're also part of a massive hierarchy, if you will? And how do they help their team deal with fear and stuff when they aren't in our position where like you and I we can just write the rules. Like
we can do
there needs
anything
to be
we want.
Anything. There needs to be a new system, like we just write it. New process, write it. Document, what do you do if you can't necessarily do that?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I'm not I've never been in that specific situation. Like I don't have any experience in that as where I'm, in the middle managing people in a very, large organization. But gosh, I'd have to imagine that while there are things that the large organization mandates you do, I think that there's probably a lot of area where you would have freedom to, it doesn't mean you can't do something more. Like, I don't think that there'd be a large organization that would say, well, geez, this middle manager is taking it upon himself to have extra meetings with his staff and make sure they're in great shape and, had his own protocol to do performance reviews with a little extra, spice in there. I don't think anybody's going to have a problem with that. I think what would happen is the higher ups you might have, depending on who's above you, you might have people that are threatened by you because they're going to go, wow, this guy's a rock star, or this girl's a rock star.
Right. And then you can help them deal with their fear as well. And
there you go. Manage up. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Great. So that kind of wraps it up, guys. The business of fear. I almost said the fear of business again. Goodness gracious.
You just want
the business of fear. I know. Thanks for watching the show here, the live podcast, as it were, or listening if you're listening to the podcast. Feel free to subscribe to the channel. Leave us a comment below. And if you're on some sort of a podcast catcher, leave us a review, because reviews are how you scale those bad boys. Thanks for listening to the Coast to Coast Pest Talk.
There you go. Is a podcast catcher like a rat catcher? What?
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically.
Okay. Different bait.
You send it and then it gets caught. I mean,
nice.
Basically
Okay.
the same thing.
Okay.
Cool. That's great.
All right, man.